You know, a few weeks ago, we told you about the plan to replace the aging Hood River Bridge across the Columbia River. It's going to be good for safety, but it does come with an increase in tolls there to help pay for the $600 million cost. Now, some of you could not help but compare the Hood River crossing to the new I-5 bridge project in Portland, which is, after all, going to cross the same river, but at a much higher price. So tonight, the tale of two bridges, a cost comparison. That's our big story. Let's start with viewer Kevin, who asked, how come it costs $600 million to build a bridge across the Columbia River in Hood River and $6 billion to build a bridge across the Columbia River in Portland? Hey, that's a great question, Kevin. Of course, the Hood River Bridge will be a lot smaller than the Interstate Bridge Replacement, and Kevin acknowledged that. Hood River will be a single bridge with 2 lanes rather than 2 bridges side by side with 4 lanes each, so yeah, bigger. But still, if 2 lanes cost $600 million, then using some back of the napkin math, shouldn't 8 lanes cost about, well, 4 times as much? That would be $2.4 billion. So how do we get to 6? Well, let's dive in and take a look. We had our transportation infrastructure expert, Anthony Massouk, dig into the details and put this segment together for us. Now, for starters, that $2.4 billion estimate, it may be napkin math, but it's actually pretty dang close. Earlier this year, the Interstate Bridge Replacement team released what you might call an itemized bill for the project. It breaks the $6 billion cost down into different pieces. One of those pieces was the estimated cost for the bridge replacement alone. So just the pair of new 4-lane spans across the Columbia River and their approach ramps, nothing else. The estimated cost range for that was roughly $1.6 to $2.5 billion. So the $2.4 billion napkin estimate, yeah, that kind of fits right in there at the high end of the range. It makes sense, I guess. We're buying lanes in bulk. The Hood River Bridge is longer than the I-5 bridge, so it does stand to reason that a single lane in Hood River would be maybe a bit more expensive than a single lane in Portland. The Hood River Bridge cost estimate also includes the entire project with all of the peripheral components on the north and south shores, which are relatively small. The Interstate Bridge project has its own pieces on the shores of the Columbia, but they, my friends, they are massive undertakings, and that's what pushes the price tag up to that $6 billion. You can probably guess the single biggest cost in there? Yeah, light rail. The extra width for light rail is included in the bridge's cost estimate, but everything else is a separate cost. Those costs include the tracks, 3 new stations, a new bridge to carry trains to Hayden Island, and a long viaduct to get them back down the bridge from the height on the Vancouver side. That's the part in yellow in this image. The light rail element comes to roughly $1.3 to $2 billion. That's a cost the Hood River project does not have to deal with at all. So that's a big reason it's less expensive. And then there are other upgrades on both sides of the river that contend with it here in Portland. Let's start with the Oregon side. Let's talk about the interchanges, those circular roads that you get on and off the interstate with. Well, as it's proposed right now, the Interstate Bridge Replacement would include rebuilds or modifications of the North Interstate, Marine Drive, Hayden Island interchanges, as well as a replacement for the bridge that carries I-5 to Hayden Island on the Oregon side. Did you know there was a separate bridge that does that? I didn't know until today. The new Hayden Island interchange would only serve traffic from the Washington side, which, you know, would be a problem for folks driving from the Oregon side. So the project would add a new local bridge for drivers heading to the island from the Oregon mainland. It's a lot of work and steel, and it all adds up to somewhere between $1 billion and $1.6 billion. Now, the Hood River Bridge project, meanwhile, includes some upgrades on the Oregon side, but they're a lot simpler, demolishing some port buildings that are in the way and presumably rebuilding a toll booth. Back here in Portland, let's look at upgrades to the Washington side of the new bridge project. It includes rebuilding the downtown Vancouver and Highway 14 interchange, as well as modifying the Mill Plain, 4th Plain, and 39th Street interchanges. The bridge's team preferred plan calls for the new bridge to cross the river at a much higher elevation than the current structure. That takes out the need for a drawbridge, but it also means the downtown Vancouver and Highway 14 interchange in particular going to be very tall with new freeway ramps there. Add all that up and you get a range of $1 to $1.5 billion. In Hood River, the Washington side upgrades are pretty sparse. The current traffic light intersection with Highway 14 will be replaced with a traffic circle, and that's lovely and basically it. Again, the cost is already part of the project's $600 million estimate. So there you have it. Lane for lane, the Hood River Bridge and the I-5 bridge actually do have pretty similar costs. So the answer to Kevin's question, yes, we technically could build a replacement I-5 bridge for about $2.4 billion, but thrown up into $2 billion in light rail costs and up to $3 billion in freeway interchange upgrades, and you're going to wind up with a much more expensive project, which we do have now on the I-5. Which brings us to the final part of Kevin's email. It seems like the extra $3.6 billion is excessive for TriMet and lane reconfigurations. He's definitely not the only person to feel that way. All those add-on components have drawn criticism, although not all from the same places. There is, of course, the vocal segment of Clark County that would love to ditch the light rail project altogether. The rebuttal to that one, pointed out by Interstate Bridge Replacement leaders, is that they hope to land around $2.5 billion in federal funding for the project, including a minimum of $1 billion from grants that the project can only get if it includes mass transit. So, yes, light rail is very expensive, but in theory, the federal government will pay for the biggest chunk of that. Other critics have taken aim at all the interchange upgrades, along with the size and the height of the bridge itself, arguing that the project is turning into a sprawling freeway expansion instead of a simple bridge replacement.
They're literally proposing to rebuild 7 interchanges between Vancouver and the three on the Oregon side of the river. And ironically, when you look at the highway costs of the project, all the elements for moving cars and trucks, it's actually the approaches and the intersections are more expensive than the bridge itself.
That is economist Joe Courtwright. He's a prominent critic of the Columbia River crossing. For those of you who are newer to the Portland area, that is the previous version of the project that fell apart in the planning stages about a decade ago. He says the current version is making the same mistakes, starting with the decision to try to build a new bridge higher up, because that means the nearby interchanges have to be higher up as well, which makes it more complicated and in turn more expensive. Courtwright also pointed to a study done all the way back in 2011 for the Columbia River crossing, which found that the 7 interchanges in the project zone are all way too close together, and that, quote, reducing and simplifying the number of interchanges would significantly improve both functionality and cost.
You would never build a freeway like that today. So first thing is, from a design standpoint, we ought to get rid of one or more of the interchanges.
Well, we asked the program administrator for the Interstate Bridge Replacement about the interchange question. He said they do plan to scale down the Hayden Island interchange, but the reason all the others are included in the project is precisely because of how close they are to each other. They're basically treating the 7 interchanges as one massive interchange, reworking all of them in an effort to improve traffic flow. But that begs the question, if we can't leave any of the 7 interchanges out of the project, couldn't we improve congestion by eliminating some of them rather than upgrading all of them? Well, Johnson said the team did study that, but it turns out it's a people problem rather than an engineering issue.
One of the things that's a given in transportation, once folks have an interchange, it is very hard to remove that point of access. You know, if folks for the last 60 years have had interchange connecting them, those folks do not want to give those type of things up.
Unlike with light rail, there's no specific pot of federal money for interchanges, but Johnson argues it's all still important that they improve efficiency as much as possible because it's going to have to compete for federal funding overall. He admits the project is trying to be one big solution to several problems at once: earthquake vulnerability, mass transit to Vancouver, congested interchanges. But he argues that in the long run, that is the best way to do it.
If you solve one problem, that you will have to come back later years at a much higher cost to try and solve the remainder of the problems in the corridor.
So what do you think about all this? Should we look at Hood River as an example in Portland, focus on the bridge itself and worry about those other things later? Or should we be doing it all at once? And just for fun, a question for you folks living in Vancouver. Would you give up your favorite I-5 interchange if it made traffic smoother? Let us know, will you? Send us an email. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090.